Before we dive into the local issues, there's many of them. What are your thoughts on the impeachment inquiry that is currently playing out in Washington?
Yeah, I was just in Washington last week, and actually I wasn't there very long, but I got a ticket to attend 2 hours of the impeachment trial. Actually, it was interesting. Every senator has a certain amount of tickets available to him or her, and so Senator Sherrod Brown provided a couple tickets to me, and John Cranley is the mayor of Cincinnati. So during our mayor's conference, we went over there and watched some of the proceedings. It's historic. It was sort of interesting to see the ceremony of it all. But in terms of the substance, that city just makes me sad. Washington, D.C. just makes me sad. They just fight and argue and bicker. I don't, to be really honest, I don't know what to think of the impeachment. It sure as heck sounds to me like President Trump probably engaged in behavior that was inappropriate and against the rules. I don't think there's really any question about that. To some extent, even he admits that. The question is that impeachable? Is it not impeachable? I'm not a lawyer. Lawyers can fight about anything. I do know this. There will be an election this November, and we will have a final decision on President Trump's future then. So there's a lot of drama. It is sort of interesting from a historical standpoint, but I just want it to all be over.
I guess you're like a lot of other people.
I think so, probably. There's the American people. I do believe that the American people really have just tuned out Washington, D.C. They really have. But to be more optimistic about it, I think it is because the American people have fundamentally given up on Washington that it allows people like me in local government to really make a difference. I don't think the citizens of our country have given up on local government yet. I don't. Because the issues that we deal with at the local level, trash collection, police protection, fire service, filling potholes and making sure we have nice parks, those are the issues that are close to people that people care about. So the folks in Washington can play their games and fight and yell. I just want to focus on results and finding common sense compromise, and I think that's what local government is all about.
Well, speaking of local government, we have a new issue that's going to be soon on the ballot,
yes.
And that is Issue 1. So can you explain to voters what Issue 1 is?
Issue 1 is an opportunity for Toledoans to invest in themselves. Successful cities invest in themselves. Toledo, unfortunately, spends less per capita than any other big city in Ohio. And as a result, we spend less per capita on police, on fire, on parks, on roads, on infrastructure. That's not a recipe for long-term success. Now, is Toledo improving? Yeah, you bet it is. Toledo is improving, and there's a lot of evidence to support that. We still struggle with gun violence, unfortunately, like many big cities do, but generally speaking, statistically, crime is down by 7% from this time over last year. We've had some good economic development news. Our budget is definitely in better order than it was a couple years ago. When I became mayor, we had a $3 million deficit. Now we have a $17 million surplus. So we're improving, no question. But there's so much more we can do. And so Issue 1, which will be on the ballot on March 17th, and that is as I stand here today, 47 days from now, will make investments in our safety, in our youth, and to be really honest, in our roads. Roads are a big problem in our community. Last year, we resurfaced 1.6 miles of residential road. When Issue 1 passes, we will resurface over 70 miles of road, not just next year, not just the year after, every year for a decade. That's 700 miles of roads fixed. It will fundamentally fix the roads of our community. Meanwhile, it will invest in our youth. We're going to grow 6 times what we do on youth programming. We're going to make sure that we're growing our police force back up to a force of 700 officers, but make sure that we're doing it by having classes that are diverse and reflect the diversity of our community. It's a chance to invest in ourselves. That's what successful cities do. That's what I think the voters are going to do on March 17th.
So how much work do you still believe needs to be done with all of those positive numbers, but what still needs to be done?
Well, the challenges that we face in Toledo, we've made a lot of progress. We really have. We still have 162,000 potholes on our streets. We've made a lot of progress, and yet 81% of the kids in Toledo schools show up to day 1 of kindergarten having already failed the state readiness assessment. That's the worst in the state. 4 out of every 5 kids, when they show up on day 1 at kindergarten, are already behind. You bet it's going to be harder to educate that child. Things are better in Toledo, but we still don't have the number of police that the Department of Justice says we should have. Things are better in Toledo, but we still have over 60% of all of our ball diamonds. The weeds have overgrown them, so I might call it a ball diamond. In reality, it's just a backstop surrounded by grass. Those are areas we can do better. Our pools aren't open the way they should be. When Issue 1 passes, we will make the investments in our city that will make sure that we invest in our kids, our safety, our neighborhoods, our roads, and our future. That's what successful cities do, and we can do it. We can do it, and I think when voters understand the amount of roads that we are going to fix, and we are literally talking about a 50-fold increase in the number of residential roads we do. We are talking about a 10-fold increase in spending on residential roads. When they understand that, and when they also understand that we're doing it differently this time, we are making the promise and the guarantee that this new money for roads must be spent on roads. It's written into the ballot language. We must do it by law. When folks understand that, I think they will support Issue 1, and Toledo will be stronger, and it'll be closer to becoming that city we all know it can be.
Well, speaking of construction and development, there is a new project that is happening at Westgate in Toledo, and there have been some concerns on City Council and of Toledo residents. So what would you have to say about that, and what do you have to say to those people that are concerned about this project, and what is the project?
Yeah, we are at the very, very early stages of that. It was just introduced to City Council at our most recent meeting, and I suspect that there will be many other twists and turns on the road before anything happens there. I think there's a lot of different possibilities of what could end up there at Westgate. That is really one of the strongest economic corridors in the entire region, to be honest. In the entire region, there are few intersections more vibrant than the intersection of Secor and Central. So I don't think anyone quite knows what's going to happen yet, but something good will happen there. I know this. I don't think anyone wants to stare at a big, vacant, abandoned, asbestos-filled Elder Bierman's anymore. So we do have to, move on from that and find something productive. And I know we'll get there. We're at the very, very early part of that process. We'll have plenty of time for public input.
So besides that project, what are some other projects as far as development that are in the works in Toledo?
Well, there is a very exciting one. I think we are very close on having a good story to tell at Southwick. I hate to do this because I always enjoy giving tips to my friends in the media. I cannot let any more cat out of the bag than that, but I think we are really, really close to an exciting announcement at Southwick. So that will be, I think you could look forward to that. Otherwise, this is just another year of positive economic momentum. They've been building it for a couple of years, but this July, our Cleveland Cliffs plant will open and be fully operational, and people will start working in it. So a lot of good economic news, which is one of the reasons that we, and as I mentioned in my speech tonight, we continue to receive such excellent rankings among job ranking magazines and things like that.
So do you believe that project will bring more people back to Toledo?
I think everything that we are trying to do will bring people to Toledo. Everything. Yes, a jobs base is important, but it's also important to make sure our city is safe, to make sure we have neighborhoods that are livable and walkable, to make sure we have productive things for our kids to do, make sure our kids are educated. All of it. Here's one thing I know for sure. There is no one simple magic bullet that's going to solve all of our problems or all of anyone's problems. It's not any one thing, it's everything. Every little bit is part of an overall story that we're trying to tell about Toledo. And it is a story of a city that is improving, but still's got a long way to go. And we need to believe in ourselves enough to want to invest in ourselves. We can fix our roads once and for all if we pass Issue 1. And when we do it, the voters will force us through their ballot language to spend that new roads money on roads. So let's go do it. I think that's the story.
So there's another issue that Toledo is dealing with, and that issue would be overdoses and drugs in our community, street drugs. So what would you have to address, if you were to address the citizens of Toledo right now, what would you say can be done to fix this issue, and what do you think is behind the issue?
I think there's a lot of things behind the issue, to be honest. I think a lot of this began, I think we saw the pharmaceutical industry, quite frankly, prescribing opioids that they knew people could get addicted to, and they did it anyhow. It's one of the reasons that Toledo was one of the very first cities to join the lawsuit that now has over 250 cities on it to bring suit against those the opioid makers. And here's what my goal isn't necessarily to recoup any money on that. If we do, we'll certainly take the money and fold it into programs for treatment. What I want to do is change the behavior. I want pharmaceutical companies and prescribers to not willingly provide prescriptions to people that are going to get them hooked. I think that is where it started, and it's a big problem. We are making some progress on it. I know it's a focus of Governor DeWine's, but there's no question how the problem began.
Well, my last thing I want to talk about is one issue that has been in the headlines a lot recently, and that is the Lake Erie algae issues.
Yes.
So, what progress has been made in the fight to fix a broken Lake Erie? So, what progress is being made, and what if you had an update for the case that's currently happening in court? So, just kind of bring everyone up to date as to what's going on as far as that.
Well, those arguments, we just had those arguments in federal court actually earlier this week. So we made the case. I think we did a pretty good job in court. Our lawyers did a wonderful job. Now it's in the hands of the federal judge, and we will see what he decides. I do know this, that the citizens of Toledo are understandably upset that we are being forced to pay for the cleanup that other people are causing. Everyone knows where this problem begins, and that's with agriculture, unchecked, unregulated agricultural runoff in faraway places, far away as Indiana, southeastern Michigan, and all different parts of Ohio. There have to be some kind of meaningful restrictions on agricultural runoff. We talk about the carrot and the stick approach. So far, the state of Ohio has been very good at giving carrots. Our last governor, Governor Kasich, gave the agricultural industry $3 billion of carrots to try to encourage them to do better. The problem has gotten worse over the last 5 years, despite $3 billion essentially flushed down the toilet. All the carrots in the world aren't going to work. We need sticks on this one. And I just think we keep fighting, and our water is drinkable. There's no question. We don't have a drinking water problem in our city anymore. We don't have a drinking water problem. We have a lake water problem. And the reason we don't have a drinking water problem is because, unfortunately, the citizens, the ratepayers of our region have had to pump so much money into our plant to make polluted water drinkable that we no longer have to worry about our drinking water. But boy, it's a shame that we are the ones that have had to pay for a mess being made by others. So I don't plan to be quiet about that over my remaining time. However many years I have left as mayor, I will be shouting and screaming about that because it's absolutely unfair. And it is wasting the greatest resource we have in this region, which is our water.
Mayor Kapszukiewicz, thank you for your time.